Good afternoon. Well, I have to confess to several problems. One is I wasn't prepared that we'll have another session in a big hall, so we are so far away. I thought we could have more of discussion and exchange. So that's one confession. The second one is that this talk has been evolving. I was adding, revising, subtracting. It's a big topic, the self of the gifted adolescents, gifted teens. And the material is taken out from my book, Mellow Out, and then I'll be able to show you the cover of the second edition. That's the book. And I also wanted to show you, see if you were closer, it would be much easier. I was quoting in the morning session from Jean Peterson, and she wrote this slim volume called Gifted at Risk, Poetic Portraits, in which she has, I think if I counted right, about 90. 62. So on one page, it's her poem about a student that she has been working with or counseling. And on the other one, she describes, explains on this page the background and how the case developed. And it's a very, very insightful book because it shows the enormous diversity of gifted kids, the enormous diversity of situations in which they find themselves, which one are from, everything is going fine to suicide on the other end, everything in between, everything you can imagine in between. So it's a slim book, but there is so much in it. It's full of eye-opening cases and experiences, and many of which you would easily relate to. So the material on the self of the gifted kids comes from my first research on the gifted that I did at the University of Wisconsin when I was a graduate student there long time ago. And at the same time, I was working with Kazimierz Dąbrowski. Well, to tell you the background, okay. I got my degree in molecular biology. I got a job at the University of Alberta in Canada, which is in Western Canada, in the city of Edmonton. And I met Dąbrowski there. And I was very much attracted to his work and his theories, and we started working together on putting some of his work in English. And that's how it started for me. So I was there for 3 years, and then I didn't want to continue on the faculty at the university in the Department of Microbiology. And so I became a graduate student again at the University of Wisconsin. And I had an assistantship at a laboratory for superior students. And that's where Michelangelo and I met. So you can imagine what a synchronicity this is, that after all these years, we meet together here again, in our old age. And so Dąbrowski had a research project on the levels in his theory, if you know his theory, which I don't expect everyone to know that. And I was scoring the material. I had to develop of analyzing it, the content analysis. And I was noticing expressions of overexcitability. And so that led me to some kind of a tabulation of expression of excitability. And then I thought, well, here is the laboratory for superior students. Let's get information from these kids here. And they were middle school and high school, which means they were from age 12 to 18. And there were several other assistants at the lab, so I asked them, well, nominate as candidates for my study, the ones they find most interesting. So they did, and I designed a questionnaire, open-ended questionnaire that had 46 questions. So I sent it to them in 2 parts, not to overwhelm them, but they were quite willing to answer things. And one of the questions that I asked was, if you ask yourself, who am I, what is the answer? So I got the answer from, I don't know, and that was all he said. I am me, okay. But then there were also very complex and existential answers to it, because when we come to the issue of the self, it's the issue of the meaning of our existence. So we really come upon big questions. What is our life about? And who are we who are living that life, okay? And the other interesting thing that faces ourselves is that we use the expression of what life has in store for us, or we can say what life has in store for me, what life has in store for you. What does it mean, what life has in store for me? Is it already prepared or not? Big questions. So, for instance, one 14-year-old boy said, I am an 8th grade boy that doesn't understand himself and other people. So he had already the awareness that the question exists, do I understand myself or not? Other people are puzzles. And there were others who said they don't think about this question. And then there were others who would say, I have some of this on the slides, and this time this is not going to be well coordinated, I'm afraid. This is the quote from, no, we already had that. Okay, so these are the questions. Who am I? How can I be separate and connected? What should I do with my life? These are the questions facing adolescents. They are floating around the head. The question of sex roles and sexual identity, self-doubt and fears. I want to spend some time on that. Striving for perfection, the burden of the gift, and the need for acceptance. So here are some of the answers. Yes, I don't know. Come back in 70 years, maybe I'll have thought about it long enough to know the real answer. So it's this sense of perspective, that it takes a whole life to find out who we are, okay? And the other one is, there is no real concrete answer. I guess I am just another minute cog in a very big system. I don't know what we are or why we are here, but I try to live as I was meant to live. So, here again, there is an understanding of the big questions. And then, now to give you an example, so that's the cover of the second edition. Do you know what the picture is? Anyone? Can you figure out what the picture is? I don't hear it. Kaleidoscope. Okay, but what is a kaleidoscope? Well, but it's a pattern, right? It's a symmetrical pattern. Well, some people would say it's a mandala, but it isn't. It's a Polish paper cut. And behind it is another one. You know, there's another larger pattern. They have enlarged it. So there are two superimposed on each other. So this is the way why I gave, what's the word? Honored my roots. Okay, what is the next one? Oh, yes. Here's a fairly good one. I think it is a dumb question to ask yourself because it doesn't matter what you think you are, but what other people think of you. So here, it's not important to this young person, his or her sense of self, because it really only matters what other people think of you, which relates to a study of Icelandic youth who were asked to describe themselves, and they wouldn't do it. They said, no, well, if you want to know who I am, you have to ask other people. You know, don't ask me. So one of the responses came in the sense of the self that no one sees. And I think maybe it is on the next one. No, that one is a very complex one, which really embodies everything that you could possibly put into it. It shows us the complexity of it. He says I'm an existence perched in a precarious balance above the abyss of failure, sorrow, despair, and everything else associated with people of misfortune. So he feels the burden of the gift, you can see already from the beginning. I'm held up by a few slender supports, among them self-confidence. Okay, so it's not as bad as we think, because he says, I have self-confidence, and a few raw talents and abilities. Included would be my imagination, ability to get along with people, and an ability to think fast on my feet. Okay, so he's aware of his strength. Forces weighing down on these supports in an attempt to overcome them are the responsibility accompanied by ability and the expectations of others. You see, this is what we already talked about, that the expectations of others are weighing heavily. You can feel like you can break down under the burden of that. The occasional self-doubt, laziness, apathy, competition from others, and my sometimes unstable emotions. Well, he is pretty good. He says just sometimes unstable emotions. Not everyone would say sometimes. I say all the time. They attempt to knock down the supports from the side, he feels. So far, they existed and remained in place. The supports have bent but not broken, so there is resilience. Dipping into that chasm, they have not dipped into the chasm, but always rebounding with the renewed strength. So he has a sense of his own resilience. Well, this is really a pretty wonderful picture, very realistic, deeply existential, and endowed with resilience, which this is something that we really like to see. Good resilience. Okay, so what do we have next down there? And here is a very sad one. When I ask myself, who am I get the answer, I'm a real skid, a nobody. A real skid is really like someone who is down low. I have no self-respect for myself. So this boy belongs to those that we sometimes met in the past year at the camp, a child who cannot say one good thing about themselves. Okay, so then you have to look into what happens. I mean, do they have overly critical parents? Or don't they, for some reason, believe anything good that people tell them about them? It's a very sad situation, and it does exist from time to time. So this one, it goes to the topic of the awareness that my subjective self, other people cannot see, which means also that I cannot see into other people's subjective self. We have to communicate in order to discover our individual selves. And so she says, I'm somebody no one else knows. Some people see one part of me, others see other parts. The real me is the one inside me, my real feelings that I understand, but I can't explain. I'm a girl who has grown up close to my family, close to my friends, and I try to be close to God as I'm supposed to. I'm very moody sometimes. And then she says something wonderful. My best friend is myself. Well, this is not a common feeling or a common statement that children or even adults can make, that I am my best friend. Okay? Very often we are in conflict with ourselves. So this is a very fortunate situation, very aware. Let's see who is the next one. Oh, here's another one. He says, this is a very it's interesting contrast. Usually the answer is, I'm an insignificant human speck in the vast universe trying to make something of itself, but will probably not succeed. A biological, imperfect being destined to certain death, as we know, in the end, and being forgotten, even though it attempted to make something of itself. But sometimes I get an irrational response. You are a perfect intelligence. You are destined to become a powerful person. This response sometimes scares me. This is the situation when we realize our own potential, and the possibilities are kind of terrifying. How to realize it, and what does it mean to suddenly come into my own power? So, I have another one here. Oh, I think we already did that one. The growing self. Well, the growing self, maybe I should go back. Oh, this works better. Oh, is this one that goes back? Yeah. Because what's typical of adolescence is the awareness of the multiplicity of selves in us, okay? We are still forming, and this is why this boy said, there are many answers to who I am, none of which are all true. There is no clear answer. There are too many eyes to ever make just only one, okay? So it's a process of growing, of sorting things out. People think I'm strange, as I try to say everything that comes into my mind. When I am alone, my mind still works faster, but it's just between myself and my other self. So he has an interesting inner perspective on himself. And this one said, I think that I have many personalities that I can change greatly from day to day, but in a way, I'll never change. So there's a sense of a stable center, I'll never change. I think I'm right about it in the middle, and so on, acting not to, and so on. So there are all these things going on inside, and let me see what's the next one that I wanted to tell you about. This is what I found very interesting, because spontaneously, without being asked the question, they would say, well, am I special or not? And they would just very modestly say, I'm an above average person, not superior, but above average. I'm fairly popular, halfway intelligent, not ugly, not cute. And because so often, I don't know how it is here, but at least in America, many people think that gifted kids and gifted adolescents think of themselves as superior, that there's some elitist thinking about them. This is not what we find, not at all. And I'll give you more examples of that. And this one said, I think about just living as a run-of-the-mill person and still being special, but I want to have a great effect on people. I think this will be possible because I've had effects on a lot of people, and I can tell this. So it's all in the state of formation. And here's one not from the city, but he said, I think of myself as a country kid who will never be more than an ordinary person. Yet in the back of my mind, I dream of being someone special. I think of myself as a friend to anyone who needs it. I feel myself as a leader, and I want followers. I need them to be what I am. The good part of it is I'm not ashamed of it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So this is, again, pretty self-confident young person. Let's see, is that? Oh, the play of opposites, you know, those in contrast. They can quite interestingly express themselves. We see contrasting, opposing sides of themselves. For instance, this girl said, for every adjective I can think of, there's one that contradicts it entirely. Artistic, lovable, yet a bitch. Shy, but loud. Mature, but silly. Calm, but spastic. You know what spastic means? Okay. And together, yet ready for a nervous breakdown at times. So quite aware of the fluctuations of moods and of the different contrasts, different opposing sides in themselves. And this boy had an even more pointed statement. I am a young man with light brown hair and hazel eyes, of high intelligence and romantic dreams. Bad points: subtlety, fraud, trickery, rivalry. I'm capable of all these things. So these ones are, again, examples. I'm a person who's very talented in sports, very good in school. I feel I'm disciplined and aware of what's going on around me. I'm artistic and creative. I think I'm nice too. Again, you see, this is a nice, positive self-concept. This one says, I am me, active, healthy person who enjoys people, but who sometimes is too competitive. Again, someone who enjoys being competitive, but it's not, how should I say, in a self-aware way, I would say. And the other ones are a bit of a perfectionist, stubborn, amiable, but a lot of the time I don't have a positive too about myself or anyone. So this one would need some help. And because when that negative feeling comes, it's not very good. What is that? No, that's the old things. Self-doubt. There's a lot of self-doubt among gifted kids that people normally would not think is there, but it is there very strongly. Like this one who said, I'm a girl that is intelligent and talented. I'm unsure what it is in store for me, and I'm afraid of what the future holds. They're very aware of the future and the uncertainties of the future, whatever it may hold. Isn't that a good expression of self-doubt? Okay, I'm a small-town high school student with dreams of raising himself above the expectation of his peers. Not adults, but peers. I'm fairly popular, although disliked, I'm sure by more than a few. With most fellow students, I'm fairly popular with most fellow students and many adults. I'm a 16-year-old boy who's very afraid that none of his dreams will come true and he'll never be more than a small-town eccentric. Okay, so there's strong awareness of the uncertainties of life. This one talks about feelings of insecurity. Often make me hesitate before doing something until it's too late. And I have lost my chance. I'm getting over this a little bit, but still affects me a lot. So she's working on it, that the shyness, timidity stops her from seizing opportunities when they present themselves. And the other one says, my strongest feeling would be that dealing with self-consciousness, I'm the type of person who is constantly questioning myself to see why I act the way I do. And that's a fairly common among these kids. So other things that they have doubts about, they have fears. I asked the question, what makes you afraid or anxious? And let's see, where's that? And this one said, I get afraid when I have to talk in front of large groups of people. I can see me shaking now when I give my speech on graduation night. I'm still not used, even after 4 years of forensics, which is learning how to give speeches, I'm still not used to speaking in front of large audiences, especially when I know people in the audience. So this is a situation where the difficulty persists. She knows about it, lives with it. It's not improving with experience, and it just has to be accepted as that. You know, the worst thing you can do is to tell such a person, get over it. No, you don't get over it when you have stage fright. And there have been many famous performers who had stage fright to the end of their lives. And so this has to be respected, right? Do you agree with that? I hope you do. Yes, good. Okay, the next one. I fear being wrongly interpreted. Well, this happens in life all the time. I hate being judged. Well, this is what we do. We grow up being judged all the time, evaluated, often criticized. I wonder whether we'll be able to get rid of it to some degree. I want only to be accepted. We all want to be accepted. It makes me angry when people form opinions based on such superficial aspects as my age. We often tell young people, we are too young to understand this, or we are too young this or that. When people form the sex, you're just a girl, or you're just a boy, way of dressing, etc. What is in my mind is what is really me. What is in my mind is what is really me. Okay. Why did this come out so small? I don't know. It was supposed to be bigger. This one is just... I have fear of losing. It can be done. It can be enlarged. Thank you. Fear of losing or not being the best probably bothers me the most, although I'm learning to accept it and try even harder. So you see, there are all kinds of special difficulties that come with being gifted. Oh, this one is a good list. This one is easy, he says. Fear of failure, fear of doing something incorrectly, fear of failing to please my parents, fear of not finding a job, failing at college, of not having enough money, of having an accident after borrowing the family car, fear of making a wrong decision. All of the above are, to a certain extent, fears of failure. They also make a pretty frightening list, don't you think, he said. Of course they make a frightening list. So here's another question that I asked, and this is the one thing that derailed me from preparing this speech, because I wanted to share with you some of what they said about their experience of death, the thought that they have of it, and there were very interesting answers. But also I want to raise it because so often, especially if you study child development, you have a textbook of child development, the psychologist will not tell you how to deal with the issue of death when children ask, what does it mean to die, what has happened? What happens to us when we die? And you know that gifted kids ask this question early. They can ask them as early as 4 or 5, things like that. So we have not done enough exploring or discourse of this. The presence of death was, let's think about it. Because what we used to say, well, the death was all around that because there was high rate of children's dying early because of illness, and so there was high childhood mortality, so everyone was aware of that. And then, of course, there were more fatal illnesses. And so we say, well, in the past, it was more part of life and accepted and talked about, but not in the 20th century. Now, in the 21st century, well, what's happening, everyone is aware of death all around us, and we can be hit by bullets at any time, anywhere. So the situation has changed again, I think. So some of them said, I never sit down at my desk and think about death. When death comes, I will probably take it in stride, but in the meantime, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Okay. The other one said, I try not to think about it because death bothers me a lot. I can't explain why. I put it out of my mind. And this boy said, I can think of dying and not get anxious because I think of the things I won't have to go through, and I believe in life after death, so it doesn't look so bad, okay? So in one case, it's a realistic acceptance. In another case, it is unsettling, so he puts it out of his mind. This one, because he believes in life after death, he is not as disturbed by the question. But of course, the awareness that you could lose the people you love in your family, someone. And so one of the boys said, yes, it scares me, and yet it doesn't. It scares me to think life, God, this is, okay. No, I'll come to that later. No, this one I think most of death in the form of other people's death. It doesn't seem to me that there is anything that will kill me now, and I have no reason to die, so it just won't happen to me, okay? I suppose that everyone feels this way. So yes, but thinking of other people's, that the people close to us, friends, most kids go through this of their grandparents, but sometimes parents, sometimes siblings, friends. But this one thought about it in a different way. He said, it scares me to think life could be ended so quickly and that brilliant minds can be wiped out in a fraction of a second. Okay? And here's another quite serious existential approach. Yes, it terrifies me to think of that. No, maybe not death, but the idea of forever. I think of it and it scares me, and I have to find someone to be with. It's a fear that raises a terror I feel all over my body. I think I'm more frightened of it than anything else. I like living. I enjoy now so much, and it's always now. Dying seems to me like the end of everything. I started thinking about it in grade school, and I still think about it now in fear. And she was already 17, so for her, the question is a very alive question. Here I have two examples, 2 years apart, because, of course, our views on things change more in adolescence than in our adulthood. So at 15, this boy said, yes, I often think of death. At times it bothers me to think that I must die sometime. By then I realize why people say that we must live our life to the fullest. For I ask myself, why am I on this earth? And where is my place on this earth? Then I think to myself and come up with the answers that I am here to use my abilities and talents that God gave me to the best of my ability. So he has a rather positive, constructive answer to this question. But at 17, he says something different. I think it doesn't really pay to think about it, so he's now pushing the question, once you are dead, you're dead. Once you are dead, you are dead. You can't change anything of your past when you are dead. So just fulfill your dreams while you are still alive and don't worry about it. That's an interesting change from 15 to 17. And I have an example also 2 years apart in a girl at 16 and then at 18. She said, I don't like to think of death. I figure when it's time for me to die, I will just die. The time I spent thinking about death, I could be doing more useful things and helping people. I cannot do things when I am dead, so I don't have time to think about it. I must do what I can now and think of death only when death comes. But at 18, she says, I hate thinking about death because this causes much grief and sadness to those around me, and I hate to see people who are sad. I also don't think about death because there is too much time ahead of me to live. So at this point, she is more consistent with what she said at 16. Thinking about death would only waste many minutes that I would otherwise have to live. But then she says, death seems like an ugly subject. So why dwell on something that causes pain and sadness? Well, another thing that happens in our lives, and it's particularly strong experience when we are adolescent because our awareness is so much more developed, is to come upon death through violence. And this one experienced that was a girl from was in his class a previous year, and she was shot and thrown down into the river. And so this is why he gives time to thinking about it, that dying is a horrible thing. And he thinks of pictures of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dachau, and Auschwitz, and he abhors war. He says, unnatural death is the worst. Because death for a cause lightens the load a bit, okay? You have a good cause to die for. But a senseless death through violence or the war is hard to take, he says. I cry when death is close, and wins when it's not, but still occurs. The thought of my own frightens me, though I don't know why. And here comes the question of what beliefs do we hold. Theologically, he says, I don't know what I believe, but I'll tell you what I hope, that there is a heaven and a God that forgives, that there is a place where happiness abounds and life is eternal. But right now, I can only hope. And then there were responses from these young people who had premonitions of other people's death. And that's very unsettling because it unsettles other people if you tell him, well, I had a dream that this person is going to die, you know, someone we all know. And then it happened, you know. It unsettles people. And so it's very difficult to talk with others about it because either they call you crazy or they're afraid of you or anything like that. But it does happen to these kids to have these kinds of premonitions. And so it's a question that they struggle with. But of course, some of them are scientific bent and they want to be aware at the point of dying, to know how it happens, you know, how the transition happens from being in the body and leaving the body. And, you know, like the one thing is that death is forever, so she didn't believe that the consciousness continued after death. But those who understand that consciousness does continue after death, when they say, well, it's very interesting how that's going to happen, leaving the body and becoming a consciousness in another state of being. So there is a curiosity about that. And in the next example, the young man takes the empirical approach. He says we need a first-hand report. And he said, wondering about death usually takes the form of what happens. What does it feel like? Or not feel like? Is there life after death? If so, how and what kind? If not, is it just an aware emptiness through eternity? And he said, I have not reached any answers or conclusions. I don't know. The only conclusion that I have reached is that death, like all things, must be experienced, or at least related by someone who has experienced it. Without this, we have no basic knowledge to build upon. All right, so what information do we have about death? Anyone can tell me? You cannot come back from it. Well, is that definite? Well, but people had visitations from dead relatives, dead friends, husbands and wives. So that is coming back, isn't it? Well, another area is the out-of-body experience or near-death experience. That's what I want to talk about, the near-death experience. You know about that, right? The near-death experience. Well, there was an interesting research done about that. They looked at the rapid eye movement cycles in sleep. There's a big difference in normal people and depressed people. And then there's a difference with people who have undergone a near-death experience. So, what is the result? Depressed people get into the rapid eye movement sleep at 60 minutes after falling asleep, or even sooner, okay? Normal people take half an hour longer. That's quite interesting. I don't know why is it going that direction. It takes them longer to go in REM. 90 minutes on the average from the people they studied. But people who had a near-death experience, almost 2 hours, 110 minutes on the average of the people they have studied before they get into REM sleep. And what do the people who have near-death experience say? Most often, not everyone, but most often they say they are becoming more calm, more confident, and they are not afraid of dying, right? So there is a definite, measurable change in the brain that correlates with what the people say about their experience, that it was a positive experience, reaffirming continuation of our consciousness, our sense of self past death. Okay? That's what I wanted to mention to you. Now, how are we on time? Anyone has any idea? Let me see, here's the schedule. It says, we go to 16:45, and this is 16:25. Well, we have a little time, yes, we do. So the one thing that I wanted to mention, depending on whether you are interested or not, independently of whether you are interested or not, that at the camp, we have the psychosynthesis exercises, a session, but then they have physical activities, and we also have different what we call workshops that we offer, and they can be on anything like poetry, they can be anything like dance movement, it can be talking about the issues of young, becoming a man, becoming a woman, this kind of thing. And I, from time to time, have a session on what I call, I don't call it, because it's an old Greek term, metempsychosis. You know what that is? Migration of souls that Pythagoras taught about. You remember that from school? Reincarnation. And I presented to them, half of the world approximately believes in reincarnation, half of the world does not. And Ian Stevenson, who put enormous amount of effort into researching cases that were, he always writing, indicative of reincarnation, he said, the people who believe in reincarnation said, why do you study it? Because we know it's a fact of life, okay? And the people who don't believe it say, why do you study it? Because we know that that's hooey, okay? That doesn't make any sense. But he persisted. And one of his books he dedicated to the dean, he was at the University of Virginia, to the dean who supported him even though he didn't believe in the reincarnation, didn't believe in the subject of his research. So the interesting thing from his, after he started collecting cases of children who remember previous lives, and here there are children who remember choosing their parents into this life. When we come into this life, we choose our parents. He found cases of physical evidence. And the cases are of the kind that someone dies a violent death, and they remember when they're children how it happened and where it happened. And in these few cases, it was able to check the records. And one example that tells it, how that works, was that this child, and then as a boy, he had marks on his chest. And he said, because I was shot in my chest, and that's how I died. And he remembered who did it and when. And so there are court records and there are medical records confirming that it happened and where it happened, that he said that it happened. So Ian Stevenson collected dozens of such cases with physical evidence, and they're fascinating, because now there's a little bit of this physical evidence, but of course, it's been around for over 20 years, and no one knows about it. Okay? Why? Why the resistance to this idea? That's an interesting question. All right. That was what I wanted to get off my chest. So, to bring you up a little after all these serious discussions, I wanted to give you a few examples of a strong sense of self. Yes, when this ego strength is great. They're very wonderful examples. Now, this one is a little self-centered. I'm me. I think that it says it all for me, but I imagine it's not too vivid a picture for someone else. I just strive to be me, to achieve the goals I set, and to experience my own personal satisfaction. That is being me. Who I am to anyone else is not important. Very strong sense of self. Wonderful. And this one is the egocentric one. I am intent on getting the most out of life through thoughts, beliefs, fun, work, and all aspects of life. Not worrying about someone else, getting ahead for myself, being independent. Well, this is, you see, at a point where he can continue on this path, or he may change, okay? We never know what's going to happen later. Different experiences bring different results. Okay. I'm getting a time to finish. Okay. I'm strong-willed. When I decide to do something, very little can stop me. Wonderful. I see myself as a person with a long way to go to achieve my goals, but I also find the strength to achieve anything I set out to do. I'm rather stubborn, but I try to be kind to others and accept each person for what they are. That's wonderful. Not what I want them to be. And finally, I'm just really me, one person in a world full of people just like me. So this is a girl who said that. And do I have another one? I'm an individual, different from anyone else, created by God and given a special purpose for this life. I'm egotistical, self-confident, quite talented, kind. So here you see contrast again. Egotistical, but kind, loving, and being special influence on someone. I'm a mass of bones and flesh filled with energy and a never-dying spirit, all right? I'm a human being capable of loving, caring, thinking, and developing myself into a more diversified and unique individual. Okay, I'll stop here.